More public comments.
Thank you. Joshua Meyerowitz, 7 Chesley Drive. A year ago today, Vivian Silver, a Canadian-Israeli exactly my age, gave her last radio interview. She spoke from her safe room at Kibbutz Be'eri. She told an incredulous interviewer that the ongoing Hamas-led attack revealed the urgent need for a peace deal. She died in the fire that consumed her home. Now, today is the global day of mourning for Vivian and the other civilians and security forces killed, wounded, and taken hostage on October 7th. It's also a day of mourning for the tens of thousands of confirmed dead and wounded Palestinians, mostly women and children, in Israel's response. 6 months after you at the Durham Town Council passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire, the bipartisan U.S.-funded killing and massive destruction have escalated. They have now spread to the occupied West Bank, Lebanon, Yemen, and even Iran. Peace activist Vivian Silver's legacy illuminates the role of propagandistic partial truths and misrepresentations on the national and global level, as well as locally at UNH. Vivian's son, Yonatan Zagin, who as a child had gone many times with his mother to Gaza, has now rededicated himself to carrying on his mother's activism. He is partnered with a 30-year-old Palestinian, Aramin, whose little sister, Abir, was shot and killed by an Israeli soldier in 2007 as she stood in front of her school. She was 10 years old. Aramin wanted vengeance, but his father, who himself had spent 7 years in Israeli jail for his resistance efforts, told his son that vengeance was weakness and that peace was the only solution. The father took his son on a tour of the Nazi concentration camp at Buchenwald and really threw off the brain of his son. He said at a recent seminar, "So I taught myself Hebrew, and I began to learn that if you want to kill yourself, keep hating your enemy. If you want to save yourself, then learn about your enemy." Aramin and Zagin are among other such peace activist pairs, and the Israeli government tries to stop such groups from speaking in Israeli schools because they say it violates a rule against slandering Israeli soldiers. There's also a lot of self-censorship in Israeli and even U.S. media. The stories we are told are usually that violence committed by us and our allies is always a response to the violence of an evil enemy. Facts that don't fit that narrative are suppressed. Very few Americans seem to know about the 2018 Great March of Return for the 70th anniversary of the expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians from Israel. Unarmed Palestinians marched toward the border with Israel in a symbolic attempt to return to the Gaza-enveloped communities, which are mostly built on the ruins of Arab villages. An independent UN Commission of Inquiry, lots of details online, found that Israeli snipers shot at journalists, health workers, children, and persons with disabilities, killing hundreds and maiming tens of thousands. Israeli peace activists also know that Lebanon's Hezbollah, now being bombed along with a lot of people who are around them, arose as a response to Israel's 1982 invasion, an 18-year occupation of southern Lebanon. But that does not fit the dominant story of their attack, and we respond. Yesterday's newspaper, Seacoast forces head out to counter Iran. In the mainstream media, Iran started the fight with us when taking over the embassy in 1979. Actually, what all peace activists know is that the fight started when the U.S. and Britain overthrew an elected government in Iran 26 years earlier, and to try to control Iranian oil. And Israel got involved in supporting the brutal Shah of Iran as well, arming the brutal Savak police with tens of thousands of Uzi submachine guns. The U.S. and Britain then are responsible for the horrific dictatorship of the Shah, and thus also for the current Iranian government that grew from predictable Iranian resistance. The same patterns and distortions, as I've outlined for you 3 times, are at UNH, where UNH officials are still peddling false information to the UNH community, the news media, and even to the courts. Those UNH entities who should be investigated have just been allowed to investigate themselves, and you can guess what the conclusion of that was. They did not do anything wrong on May 1st, and they have not lied about what they did subsequently. More needs to be done. So will you please pay focused on your critically important resolution on August 12th, protecting, constitutionally protected, nothing to do with towns or states, freedom of speech and the right not to get beaten up or threatened with violence. for speaking about those things. So at this time of year, we usually say happy and healthy new year. I wish you that, but most I can hope for is sort of a happier and healthier, and I hope more peaceful new year. Thank you very much.
Anyone else like to make public comment this evening?